Hey guys, it's time for part number 2 of Daily, number 407, where we learn to be a better gamer, and we're watching Grubby do a wonderful opening against Chef. In part number 1, we talked a little bit about how the 1-2 step pressure worked very well together. The Zerg was forced to low tech, and that way when our Warp Prism arrived, it was free to move around the map without any sort of worry or fear of being shot down. But I think the most important part of all of that is that Grubby did some stuff at the start that allows him to get a third expansion up really, really safely. And we can see just by looking at the screen right now that it just looks very safe. At no real point could Zerg attack it. We looked at Sheth has just now gotten his money amount of drones up 70. He has 10 roaches, 12 zerglings that are busy trying to defend against some drop that's poking and prodding around. And many would say, well, isn't a Spire going to be able to shut this down 100% of the time? Well, the answer is that Spire is going to be late due to that early Zealot push. So already, Dr. Grubby, I am loving what you are doing. Oh! And immediately, Sheth is doing something that every Protoss is terrified of, which is whenever Zerg hits the T button. Wait, Mutalisk hotkey is T, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Confirmation from Rob
Yes,
Simpson
it
of
is.
Blizzard Esports. Yeah, I mean, well, I said that out loud. I was like, Mutalisk. No, there's a T. You just have to get there eventually. Mutalisk is the hotkey. Yeah, the Mutalisk play has been increasingly the scary thing because you get the Zergs that just only build Mutalisks, only counterattack in the main, and over here, nonstop. But one thing I love about any I'm going to take my third expansion early kind of build is that we always have an easier time figuring out what we need to do. If Mutalisks come in, how do I defend against those? If he does a huge burrow attack, how do I defend against those? If he does some sort of huge push at the middle, how do I defend against those? Those are much easier questions to answer than, he seems to be getting a lot of stuff. Well, when do I attack him? It's much more difficult to think in that aggressive term. But you'll note that Grubby, right off the bat, once he gets 2 Colossi, and gets that range upgrade, he immediately pushes right away. And he's pushing along these sort of narrow sides. And this is sort of a nice facet. Grubby did see this Spire popping down. And one of the best ways to deal with anyone going Mutalisk Zergling is to prevent him from ever being able to attack you. So suddenly, we're just stepping forward. Some seemingly haphazardly thrown down force fields, but Grubby is continuing to build up a lot of infrastructure around here. So good. So good. And this is, I would describe as an example of sort of a core technique that I think is highly underused, which is, if something's beating me, rather than figuring out how to defend it, I just attack it right before he attacks. Mutalisk, how do you defend against Mutalisks? Well, right now Grubby's main looks pretty damn safe because there's all this stuff in mid. I think it's important not to get too overeager with these types of forces because, as you'll note, overeagerness can oftentimes lead to you losing a lot of stuff. You can get caught in a slightly awkward position. But I'm not going to worry too much about the fact that this Warp Prism is actually making a cameo appearance in the battle because it's not the best cameo. As you'll know, because he's dead. He's a dead cameo. Excellent. Cool. I'm great at illustrating points. And from this moment on out, you'll notice that it's pretty clear what Grubby needs to do. He needs to just continue to sit quietly and calmly, defend by largely making Stalkers for the air defense, Colossus for the ground defense. I'm a little surprised, though, to see Grubby not getting his Twilight Council up as early, since he'd love to be able to get those upgrades up, but I'm not surprised given the fact that he's under some serious duress with this attack. But we can straight up see the convenience of having this positioning. And look, the Colossi can waltz right on down and easily isolate anything that gets a little bit out of the way. So I'm going to go forward for just a teensy bit longer before I take a brief pause. Cool. Right about now is when I want to just halt for a brief period. So what did we actually see there? We did the opening in part 1, and what we've just seen thus far is Grubby about to be under some threats from this Mutalisk Harass, but as you'll note, the Mutalisk Harass has basically never been able to happen. Right back from the get-go, when this push was coming on, if we look at the unit station, there's 13 Mutalisks, and in the production, yeah, there's 2 Mutalisks, but I'm going to alternate between the production and the unit tab just to note 12 Mutalisks, 13, mainly roaches being made because we're about to die. 12 Mutalisks, mainly roaches being made. Mutalisk being lost. Szeth kind of plays with building another Mutalisk, but now he has 2. And this is right when this attack began. You're seeing that even though Grubby lost his whole army there, he lost absolutely like everything that he was hurling down the middle, he manages to successfully dodge any sort of Mutalisk attack from coming. I think that's really, really key. It never quite got off the ground, that Mutalisk harassment. And then as Szeth continues to try to put that kind of pressure on, from the ground, Grubby is obviously going to just build what he can to defend. But it's no longer this awkward spot where you're in a screwed position as Protoss on 2 bases. Now we have this 3rd base up and a very clear chance to take a 4th base. And I do think that Grubby may have needed to build this Twilight Council just a smidge earlier, if for one reason, he really needs to get these +2/+2 upgrades started. So, now what I want to talk about is mid and late game decision making as compared to your early game decision making. So, something like Hellion Harass, or a Warp Prism Drop, or Fast Void Ray. These are all little tiny prods and pokes you can do at the start that are generally part of your build. But there's this weird thing that happens where when many folk hop into the mid and late game, they just build a big ball of stuff. And then that's all they do. So in this position, it's so easy to be like, alright, I'm going to build my ball of stuff, and then I'm going to just attack with this big ball of stuff. And that can work, but what I still love so much from Grubby, who opened up Fast Warp Gate, who followed up with Warp Prism, is now building another Warp Prism and is getting the speed upgrade for Warp Prism. So you know that there's some big harassment that's going to be coming down the pipeline. Grubby continues to be really, really, really aggressive. And one thing I want to note, just a single robotics facility and a ton of gateways. Like a lot of gateways, 10 on 2 bases. More gateways means you can be aggressive more easily. You don't lose Colossi very quickly. Because you have so many gateway units and you can replenish them ultra fast. So Grubby's doing these nice little pushes forward. And notice with every push, he's doing something more. He's expanding. Ah, yeah, nice. And Grubby can comfortably pull back with this attack pretty much at any time. But the aggression is much easier to justify because we have all these bases on the backside. You saw that when that Warp Prism attack happened, expand. When this next big attack is coming, we expand. Expanding and attacking, as we talked about in yesterday's daily, one of the most lovely and effective ways to get many a base. Right, Rob?
Many bases.
Many bases. Excellent. Rob is like my, he is my multiplication symbol, you would say. Any emotion or statement I make, Rob agrees in full force. Right, Rob?
Lots of emotion.
Lots of emotion. Excellent. So if I'm really sad, Rob just totally bums me out.
Oh.
But if I'm in a great mood, oh, Rob, he's like a multi-scoop ice cream cone.
Yeah!
Oh, it's so great. So Grubby, I ordinarily would talk about this Warp Prism harass that should happen, but instead what I'm just going to show you is something that's cool. Let me describe what should have happened, that this push should have been doing something, and that this harassment should have been doing a multi-pronged attack. I will note that let me come back. This is a committed attack position right here. This is still committed, right? Trying to back up. Right here, Grubby is still not committed to attack anything. He has the Observer here. He's forcing Spine Crawlers. There's some roaches being made. There's actually nothing wrong with pulling the whole army back, rejoining with these Stalkers, this 3rd Colossus, and then making another push. I want to encourage you to do lots of these super ultra scary style pushes and pull away, because the worst thing ever is when you get to a position where you are committed and you probably won't win. Hero almost never gets into these committal battle positions. Now, despite the fact that I'm labeling this as, you know, perhaps not our best decision, this is still a testament to how powerful it is to take this third and fourth, that Grubby can just re-macro so quickly. Because at this point right now, you are just committed. These units are 100% guaranteed to die. Except when Grubby does this, which is just so slick. What a total baller. Most baller man in the world. But still, what makes this so powerful is that Grubby gained a base out of this entire exchange. A fourth base is up for him right now. That's big. That's like a big damn deal. We like fourth bases. And this is something that you'll see and feel again and again and again if you aren't expanding a lot. Every time you expand, or every time you attack, just expand. Just arbitrarily. And what you'll feel is you'll just have a stupid amount of money. You won't even know how to spend it. Ugh, gross. Grubby, even though he's down by about 65 supply right now, and by about, I mean exactly 65 supply because I have a degree in mathematics. He's going to be able to plop up a ton of units very, very, very quickly. And again, with Blink Stalkers and Colossi, he can easily blink up and down the cliffs. He can easily walk up and down the cliffs. And we're seeing yet another nice cameo from the Warp Prism. The instant the Warp Prism's down, Grubby just builds more Warp Prisms as rapidly as he possibly can. Now, what we're going to see Grubby get into here is a little bit of a regrettable position. This is largely due to the fact that Grubby lost so many units in this attack that he committed to that he didn't necessarily have to commit to. But watch the way that Grubby's able to defend this. It's very easy to just go, verp, derp, this is the base I'm taking because it's the closest base, derp. But you have to think of how you're going to defend it. Natural expansions, almost always a great base to take, but not necessarily what you have to take. Sometimes it's easier to take another main and defend that than it is to take your own natural expansion. For instance, if your opponent is going one base Colossus in PvP and you're going Blink Stalker, much easier to defend another main. So see, Grubby can just do this retreat into the shrubbery, and notice how he could have blinked right here and then popped up, but instead he retreated back as far as he could, and notice where the roaches are. Nowhere near anything that they can actually threaten. On a lot of other maps, I feel like Grubby would probably die right now, but his absolutely stunning planning of his expansions is giving him this opportunity. And anytime Grubby doesn't have a Warp Prism, he just builds another Warp Prism. And is putting constant, non-stop pressure on the opponent. Now, Grubby does end up using his Warp Prism as an observer, and does this sort of fun stuff. And then he finally kills it off. But Grubby could have just as well waltzed forward with Blink Stalkers and then done this Warp Prism drop at the same time. Blink Stalkers are a force that you should always have be very, very active. You can easily waltz right into the middle of the map, get ready to do a ton of damage, see that there's too many units, and pull back to retreat. And you might say to yourself, well, what if he has Infestors? Really easy. Put your Stalkers here and blink one forward and just poke and prod around. There's no reason why you have to be walking everything forward when you first see those scary units. This is the part where I'm going to have to crane my head because oh, the Warp Prism did die. Excellent. I don't have to do that much mini-map watching. So Grubby's in still kind of an awkward position. The only ultra-scary, big damaging units he has is this one Colossus. And other than that, he has a ton of Stalkers. But you see how frequently Grubby's doing this little mini harassment type stuff? This was at a slightly bad angle. If he was here shooting at this hatchery, just pulls back there and retreats. And what we're seeing again and again and again is the importance of just little basic positioning things that are happening throughout the game. The positioning of this expansion, doing such a great job. The positioning of those Blink Stalkers, hurting us a little more than helping. And time and time again we see that having this nice, lovely choke to defend up so helpful. With one robotics facility, you should definitely opt to keep those Colossus as alive as possible. But what's kind of an interesting thing to note is that ordinarily what you'd be at this point in time is a 2-base Protoss doing a lot of a 3-base Protoss doing a lot of defending at your 3rd, desperately trying to figure out a way to get your 4th base up. Instead, what we're seeing is a 4-base Protoss who's not really struggling very much to defend anything. And suddenly, Szeth is playing the most dangerous game ever, where he really, really kind of wants to get into an economic lead. And it's going to turn out that this Broodlord Infestor Corruptor force is going to be putting a lot of eggs into this one basket. I don't know what these 4 Zealots are doing. I've been giving a lot of reasons for a lot of stuff all game long, but these 4 Zealots are doing their own thing. This move was not endorsed by Grubby in any regard. This was an independent action. Poor things. Alright, so now we're getting a mothership. One thing I talked a lot about in yesterday's daily was this idea of having a late game transition just sort of visualized. So that way, when things finally start to calm down a little bit, and your opponent is maybe making a big step forward, like for instance with Broodlords, being able to get out of just this big mass mid-game mode, I think is super important. It's really easy to just be going Marine Tank Medevac, and that's it for the whole game long, but you need those Ghosts and Vikings. Here, one of the first steps that Grubby's doing is getting a mothership. Now, I want to talk about some of the late game units that you can get as Protoss, like Archons, like having a lot more Immortals in your mixture, like getting Void Rays. Void Rays are really, really good late game units, if you can get a ton of them up, that is. But I want you to envision your Colossus Stalker force. You're really close to max. There's been a lot of back and forth, and you want something extra to bolster it up. Just a little extra something to just throw in there. The mothership is actually one of the easiest things to get. It doesn't actually cost that much. I mean, yeah, I know it costs 408 food, but relative to how much, getting 4 or 5 Archons would cost to bolster your mothership in that way, the mothership is a great tool that you can use to immediately ramp up being aggressive. And as we're seeing, Grubby has literally never stopped exploiting these little up and down paths all game long. Now, in terms of the DT Shrine, interestingly, Grubby isn't about to lose, which is, like, so totally weird. I mean, ordinarily, you only ever get DTs when you're dead as shit, but we're going to go ahead and get up the Dark Templar Shrine. I would honestly say that, in my preference, this DT Shrine should be up a lot sooner, though I think it's completely understandable that Grubby doesn't really need the Dark Templar. DTs are largely used for controlling expansions and shutting those down. And if you're expanding a ton like this, there's not as much need, for instance, to have your Zerg player lose this. And still, as we see, Grubby's just calmly sitting up on these high grounds with lots and lots and lots of units. He hasn't even really moved down, sticking largely back to this sort of harassment stuff. And as you can clearly see, the more aggressive Szeth is with these sorts of attacks, the harder it is for Szeth to stay back here and defend against this sort of jazz. Now, at this expansion, let me just talk about why Grubby's awesome. Okay, cool, Ultralisk knockdown force fields. But what Grubby's going to do is he's going to plant a force field here and a force field here. Ultralisk can't fit through these spaces because there's warp gates here, so this effectively just shuts the roaches out. Oh, how sick is that? What a beast! What a total frickin' beast. Now, against this sort of army, this Roach, Infestor, Ultralisk army, logically you'd think, I want the Immortals up. If you are ever in a serious bind and you don't have the Immortals up, Dark Templar are an extremely effective alternative to be a mega superstar against these Ultralisks, especially when your Stalker count's this high, because you can just blink and pick off the Overseers. So what we're going to see right now is Grubby is in somewhat of an awkward spot. We've been talking a lot about his, counterattack harassment, which he is just super on point with. His expanding timing, which he's been really on point with. And now he's just going to warp in a frick ton of DTs, which, though it might seem, this might seem a little bit like Grubby is identifying that there's no Overseers here, so we can easily kill it off or something like that. But instead, Grubby's force plus all these DTs is the perfect response to this. Even if Chef did have detection, a lot of units would die real fast here. This is one of the best emergency backup things to get when you're up against a lot of Ultralists and you don't quite have your Mortis map. Stalkers are pretty decent too. And every time I see this Overlord on the minimap, I kind of expect it to be a Nidus Worm, but it's not. So Grubby, cool, shutting down that attack. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to do the late game, we're going to do questions, and then we're going to get set up for the After Hours Gaming League, Week 2 between Zynga and Epic. So don't go, because I have good taste in music. Oh, yeah.